So hello dear students, welcome to the video lecture on memory management module. So in this we are just going to learn about the basics and the swapping. In the next coming videos we will just discuss about the paging concepts and all. So let us see the basic introduction about the memory management. So we all know that in the computer system we have two types of memory, the main memory and the secondary memory. So since the main memory is of limited size, we cannot accommodate all the processes running in the system. Hence we just go for the secondary memory devices. So in which all the processes will be kept in the secondary devices initially, and whenever they want to run they will be brought onto the main memory. So they can just run as a process. They can allot the CPU taken out which are selected from the main memory. Means before they go into execute they has to brought into the main memory. So when we keep multiple processes in a memory, that might lead to the memory management. So obviously whenever we have a multiple processes which are waiting for the CPU in the main memory, there must be some kind of management that has to be taken care. I mean that has to be just handled or so the main memory management can also include the major tasks like memory allocation and address translation. When we just talk about the management, it's not that with respect to only the processes management. So it also includes the major task like memory allocation, because whenever you brought the process or the program from the secondary devices to the main memory, so definitely the main memory, so what portion of the physical memory has to be allocated for that process, where is the free memory available, that and all has to be kept track in order to fit the process that has taken from the secondary device. And also the address translation, since the secondary devices deals with the logical addresses. So whenever you are bringing them onto the main memory, whereas the main memory is of physical addresses, there must be some kind of translation is required, wherein which the logical addresses has to be just translated to the physical addresses and physical addresses back to the logical addresses. So these are the two major tasks that we are just going to carry out under the main memory management task. We have a few basic concepts, the basic hardware support before we just go into these two tasks. Let us see what is that. So the basic hardware. So main memory and registers are only the storage where the CPU can access directly. Means the CPU is able to access the instructions or data only either from the main memory or from the registers. And also we know that every process must have a separate memory space. Whenever you just brought it from the secondary devices, you have to allocate on the main memory in such a way that the complete separate space have been just, or the separate memory addresses have been just dedicated for the process, so that it is available only in that space or only in that range of addresses. The ability to determine the range of legal addresses that the process may access, and to ensure that the process can access only these legal addresses, we can use pair of registers. They are nothing but base register and the limit registers. That is nothing but whenever say suppose you have got generated the process, you have just start executing the process. Whenever you start executed the process, so definitely it is just going to allocate it the memory space. So where it must say that the process begins from which memory location and it ends at what location. Means the starting address and the end address of the process must be known. So that can be just known through the two registers. One is base register and the limit register, where the base holds the starting address, limit holds the last address or range of the addresses. So in this you can just see small description about all the things what we just discussed right now. So assume this is the memory snapshot of the computer system, wherein which portion of the memory, the physical memory, have been dedicated to the operating system, which is permanently stored over there. And there is a user space where you could just accommodate multiple processes. So here in which we have three processes that have got loaded onto the main memory. And here we have two registers, base which is holding the starting address of the process 2 and limit address which is holding the last address of the process 2. So if the process make an attempt to access any instructions from any other processes, you can just trap to the operating system saying that the process is just going to access illegal memory locations that does not belongs to this particular process memory space. So that is what we are just going to known by having a base and limit registers. So here is a diagram which actually shows the hardware address protection using the base and limit registers. How we could just have a protection by not allowing the process to just access out of the memory limit. So here we have an example where the CPU can just generate the logical address, and you need to just check out that is that process base address is greater or equal to the base address of it, and whatever the address generated by the CPU, if it is greater than the starting address of that process, we need to just check out is it within the limit of it. So base plus the limit address, that is a range address. If it lies, whatever the address the CPU got generated, if it lies within the base and limit address space of that process, then you could just say that it's a legal, it is just going to access the legal memory space that belongs to that particular process. Suppose if the address, whatever it has got generated, if it is not within the limit, so then you could just say that the process is just going to have a illegal access. So that you could just check out by making use of these two registers. So let us see what is the address binding. So addresses may be represented in different ways. So obviously, say assume we have written some code, the source code. So whenever you need to just execute any of the particular program, it might go through several steps, isn't it? You need to just edit the program first, you need to compile it, you need to link the libraries, you need to load the object file or the execution file, and you need to just execute and see the output. These are the several steps that have been involved in the SDLC cycle of the process. So in the same way, at each steps or at each phase of the program execution, we come up with the different types of addresses. So what are they? We need to just check out. So addresses in the source program are generally symbolic addresses. For example, say suppose if your program has any variable name such as the count, name, age, anything. So these these variable names are actually indicates or represents the symbolic addresses. When you compile the program, so object code will be generated, as we all know that. A compiler will typically bind these symbolic addresses to the relocatable addresses. That is nothing but whenever you just compile the program, so there will be an object code that have been just generated for each of the instruction. So say suppose I have an instruction int count. So count is a one symbolic address or the location, name of the location. So when you create an address for that, so in the object file, it would be in the fourth line of the source program. So means with respect to the beginning of this module where this variable is available, that would represent the relocatable code. Okay. So remember, so symbolic addresses are just available, whatever the variable names that are available in the source program, that represents the symbolic addresses. When you compile the program, so whatever the object code that has been generated for those symbolic addresses, and beginning from the module where they are available in the object file, so that would indicate the relocatable code. So for example, so you can just say this count variable is available from 14 bytes from the beginning of this module. So that would represent the relocatable addresses. When you start executing, when you start load the program, the linkage editor or the loader will turn the bind the relocatable addresses to the absolute addresses. Now whenever you just load the program onto the main memory, obviously we have to just deal with the physical addresses because the main memory deals with only the physical addresses. When you just load them on the main memory, we have to add this say suppose on the main memory I need to get to know what is the physical address of the count. So that can be just simply known by having a base address, whatever where it is actually the program is available. The starting address of the program is available in the base address. If you take out that base address, if you do plus of the relocatable, so you will easily get the physical address of those those variables. So you can just see the example. Says assume I have 74,000 is the starting address of this program where he has beginning to allocate the memory. That is the beginning address of this module. So since the relocatable address of count is 14 bytes from the beginning of this module, so only the thing is that you have to add 14 bytes from the beginning address of the module. That is 74,000 plus 14 bytes. You will get the physical address of the count variable. So these are the different ways in which we actually deals with the different addresses throughout the program execution. So in the second step, so when the compiler binds the symbolic addresses to the relocatable addresses, so that would be known as a compile time binding. Okay, so in the same way, when the loader bind the relocatable addresses to the physical addresses or absolute addresses, so that is actually known as load time binding. Remember. So next point says that classically the binding of instruction can be done in all the phases. It might happen in the binding of instructions or the data to the main memory can happen in the compile time. It can also happen in the load time, or it could be happen in the execution time. So what happens in the compile time binding? Suppose if the compiler knows the absolute code of that particular variable of that particular instruction prior, so it could actually replace the symbolic address directly with the physical address or the absolute code. So that could be happen in the compile time. So say suppose if he does not know the absolute code while at the compile time, at least you could just generate the relocatable code for that particular instruction. So finally in the execution time, so if you know the relocatable code, so that address, that relocatable code can be just added to the beginning address which is there in the base register, and you could just get to know that what is the absolute address for that program. And the binding where binding of relocatable code to the absolute will be just delayed until runtime finishes, because during runtime we are not going to know where this program is just going to be allocated memory on the physical device. So that until that the binding will not happen. So let us see the next thing. What are the logical and physical addresses? So logical addresses. So these logical addresses are actually generated by the CPU. So they are also referred to as a virtual addresses. Means whenever you start executing the program, for each of the instruction, maybe line by line instruction, so there will be particular addresses that are going to be generated by the CPU. So they are nothing but the logical addresses. And in the same way, that addresses that are seen in the memory unit or with respect to the physical device, that is MMU. So that is, the memory unit, the physical memory. So that is actually known as a physical address. So you need to remember, if the whenever you execute the program, the address generated by a CPU is generally known as logical address or virtual address. So whatever the address you can see in the physical memory device, so that is going to known as a physical address. So the logical and physical addresses might be same during compile time and load time address binding schemes. So they look to be similar during these two times, but logical and physical addresses may differ during the execution time, because as I told, during execution time we would not be knowing that where exactly the memory will be allocated for the program, so that won't be known. So it might just get changed. So that's what the reason why they are differ. So next, what is logical address space? So the space is nothing but the collection of all the logical addresses. So that's why it can also be set as a set of all the logical addresses generated by a program or by the CPU. So all will be constitute the logical address space. In the same way, whatever the set of physical addresses that are generated by a program will be added to the physical address space. So the logical address space has set of all the logical addresses. Physical address space will have all the physical addresses of that particular program. So what is MMU? The memory management unit is the device that actually maps the virtual to the physical addresses at runtime. So obviously, whenever you want to load the instruction, whenever you want to run the program, the logical addresses generated by him has to be mapped to the physical memory. So there must be some translation between the logical addresses to the physical address. So that mapping will be just done by MMU. Next concept is dynamic loading. So we know that the entire program and all the data of the process must be in a physical memory for the process to execute. So the size of the process is thus limited to the size of the physical memory. To obtain the better memory space utilization, we can just go for having a dynamic loading. That is nothing but, so before you execute any of the program, we all know that there has to be initially brought into the main memory. If the memory size is too smaller, so this would limit the process number of processes or the size of the portion of the process that got loaded onto the main memory. So but to have a better memory space utilization, so to have a better memory usage, you can just go for having a dynamic loading. Then what is dynamic loading? With dynamic loading, a routine is not loaded until it is called, and all routines are kept on the disk in a relocatable load format. Only the main program is loaded into the memory and is started executing. When routine needs to called, the relocatable linking loader is called to load the desired routine into the main memory. That is the basic idea behind the dynamic loading. Means when you have a program, this program might have a several modules, isn't it? So but instead of just having a program with all its other modules loaded onto the main memory, what you could do is that you could just load only the main program, and all other sub modules or sub routines can be just called only whenever they are needed. So that actually help us to reduce the memory consumption by that particular program. So the advantage of memory loading is that the unused routine is never loaded. This method is particularly useful when large amounts of codes are needed to handle infrequently occurring cases such as error routines. Say suppose in this case what happens, these error routines, whatever the code we have written to handle the errors, so that will be just infrequently called, right? They are not going to be called every time. So when the error occurs, then only we are just going to make a call for those routines. So in this case, what we could do is that instead of just loading those routines initially to the main memory before the program executes, you just let it be on the secondary disk only. Whenever that error occurs, you can just make a call so that that will be brought from the secondary memory to the main memory. That is the basic idea. And also the same thing we have seen under a modular operating system architecture, if you have remembered. So the dynamic loading does not require special support from the operating system. However, may help the programmer by providing a library routines to implement the dynamic loading. So we have library routines that are available to help with the dynamic loading. So next concept is swapping. What is swapping? So the total size of processes can exceed the physical memory. So maybe in the bigger application, what happens, we might have a process that have been written thousands or lakh of lines over there. So if the process size is too lengthier, so we could not accommodate the entire process into a memory, because say assume the memory size is of only 4 kilobyte and we have written the program with the 10 KB. So in that case, we could not load the entire program onto the main memory. So backing store, which is a fast disk and large enough to accommodate the copies of all the memory images for all users, must be used. So that's why we have the use of secondary devices. So in this case, we are just going to use the disk as the fast and the largest memory device, which is used to store all the memory images for the users. It must provide the direct access to the memory images. So obviously memory images is nothing but the snapshot of the processes wherever they are available on the physical memory. So if it is available, they can be just fit in that particular location once they brought from the secondary memory. So the process can be swapped temporarily out of memory to a backing store and then brought back into the memory for continued execution. So say suppose in the RR round robin scheduling algorithm, the process is allowed to execute only for time quantum. So once that time quantum expires, it has to switch to the CPU has to switch to the next process. In that case, the process 1 has to go back to the disk and we need to bring the P2, that is process 2. So means every time when we want to just in some situations, so there is a need of switching the processes from the backing store to the main memory and from main memory back to the backing store or the disk. So that is actually known as a swapping. So we have rollout and roll-in, which is the alternate or just the variant of swapping, which is used in the priority-based scheduling, in which so always the lower priority process will be swapped out so that you can just make a space for the higher priority process whenever they are arrived. So the variant of swapping known as rollout and roll-in is used in the priority-based scheduling. Here we have one diagram which actually shows the swap in and swap out actions. So here we have a main memory, here we have a backing store, that is disk. So there may be a process that have been swapped out back to the store and I need process P to bring onto the main memory. You could just swap in to the main memory. So this is a simple example of swap in, swap out. So here the context switch means context switch is nothing but taking out the CPU from one process to the next process. You have to swap out one process and swap in one more process, right? That is the context switch time. So in such swapping system is fairly high. Obviously it will be high in order to swap in and swap out and give the control for that program to execute. So obviously it takes longer time. To get an idea of the context switch time, let us have this example over here. Let us assume there is a user process of the size 10 MB and there is a backing store with a transfer rate of 40 MB per second. When you want to actually transfer the process onto the backing store from from backing store back to the main memory, this would require the size of the process divided by the speed of the disk. So that is nothing but 10 MB. 10 MB could be represented in 10,000 KB and 40 MB could be represented in 40,000 KB per second. If you just take the size of the thing divided by the speed of the transfer rate of that disk, so you could just get the amount of time it would require to transfer that size of process. So it might take 1/4 seconds, so which is 250 milliseconds when you convert that into the milliseconds. So assume that no head seeks are necessary and assuming an average latency of 8 milliseconds. So this seeking time, so when we just go for secondary memory management, we'll get to know what are the seeking times and all. Seeking time is nothing but since we are dealing with the disk, so disk will have number of tracks and number of sectors on each of the track, right? So where the process have been stored somewhere. So we need to just get to know before swapping in or swap out the process, so where it is available on the disk. So in order to seek its position, it might take 8 milliseconds. So that is the latency, or that is the average latency it might need to find out the process on that particular packing store, or need the latency time which is required to find the space for this process onto the backing store. So and assume the swap time is 258 millisecond. Means so the swap time we got it as 250 millisecond. If you add the latency of 8 milliseconds, we are going to get it as a 258. So this is the amount of time which is required to take out the process from the backing store and or otherwise to keep the process onto the disk. So since we need to do both the swap out and swap in, the total swap time to bring in and to brought out, so we might require 258 plus 258, that is 516 milliseconds in total. So for efficient CPU utilization, we want the execution time for each process to be long relative to the swap time. So obviously, so because if the process execution time is smaller than the swap time, so within it gets executed, so it might be just swapped out, isn't it? So always you have to make sure that the process execution time is little longer than the swap time. Thank you.